Welcome to Bio 27, Lesson 7.2 on breathing. And we'll start off by looking at the structure of the muscles that are involved in breathing. The first one is the diaphragm, that is a dome-shaped muscle underneath your lungs, also attached to the bottom of your rib cage. The other muscle is these pieces of muscle between all of your ribs, which are called intercostals. And together, these two muscles will increase the size of your chest cavity, causing air to rush in because it'll be more concentrated outside than inside a bigger space, or they will contract in and make the chest cavity smaller, which case will cause the air to rush out. These two mechanisms will be the way that your inhaling and exhaling happen, which is what we're talking about in the next two slides. So when the intercostals and diaphragm make the chest cavity bigger, we've got less pressure on the inside than there is on the outside. Then wherever the air is higher pressure, it will rush into the lower pressure space. So that's your inhaling process. And opposite is when your ribs, intercostals and the ribs are pushing in, your diaphragm pushing up, making those air molecules now compressed inside your thoracic cavity, and that'll cause the exhaling and the air to rush out. And this shows you the shape of a diaphragm when it's pulled down, making the thoracic cavity bigger, causing air to go in. And it shows you on the right what happens when the diaphragm is pushing up and making this cavity smaller and air rushes out. Same thing that's profiled in this picture with a flatter diaphragm and a rounder diaphragm pushing up, making the air pushed out of your lungs. There is a simulation you can check out on your PowerPoint as well. Okay, the pneumothorax is a collapsed lung due to a puncture wound. And I have to go back to a diagram in 7.1 here, because this yellow area is the space between your pleural membranes. So if something punctured your lung, or if even a rib was broken and punctured your lung, what would happen is that air would seep out of those holes and into your pleural membrane space and fill this pleural membrane space until it was full of air, filling more with air, and basically collapsing your lung, because this area would be filling with air instead, because it would be escaping out of that hole. So what has to happen, incidentally, like a first aid treatment, would be that they put a syringe into that space between your pleural membrane, and when they do that, the air will rush out of there and into the syringe, and they can re-inflate your lungs that way. So that's the first aid procedure for pneumothorax or collapsed lung. Moving on from there, by the way, this is a picture of a collapsed lung where something, maybe a rib or something, has punctured the lung, and so that air is seeping into the pleural space here, and all that we have is a small area of lung that can still exchange gases. So it's kind of a feeling of suffocation that will result. So here's a little link you can check out on the pneumothorax. Okay, spirograph, the air moving in and out of your lungs. I'm going to just go through this picture. It's a very important picture about the spirograph, and it is a big part of 7.2. So make sure you know this terminology. And so I'll start with your normal breathing in and out, just like the waves of a tide go in and out. Tides moving in and out of the shoreline is what gives us the word tidal volume, and that's your normal breathing in and breathing out that is happening. So in, you're taking a breath in, this would be a breath out, in and out. And you can see here that it's regularly around 500 milliliters, which is about 2 cups of air for the two lungs together that is in a typical or average breath in and breath out, 500 milliliters each way. Now, if you, right now, you can try this, breathe all the way in as hard as you can. What you're doing there is testing your inspiratory reserve, how much air you can fully put into your lungs. And of course, with more training and exercise, people are able to strengthen their muscles and increase their ability to hold more air in their lungs, so your inspiratory reserve volume can go up with increased fitness. And also going from that tidal volume area, you can try this right now, exhale as hard as you can. That would be your expiratory reserve volume. Now you might notice that there is this residual volume area that is still there even though you try to exhale absolutely all the air in your lungs. You cannot move the residual volume because it's there as a safety amount, just for safety. There's a little bit of air left in the bottom of all of your alveoli so that your blood has a bit of oxygen available to it. So this is something that you will not be able to remove. So when you take as deep of a breath as possible and exhale all of that air, you can check your vital capacity. So if you were to use that spirometer machine, which I'll talk to you about next, in this little diagram of it, it's just a tube where you stick a little cardboard tube in this mouthpiece area, and the piston is down at the bottom, but you take a deep, deep, deep breath, exhale all your air into this machine, which is a drum of air that is going to be lifted through water. So it's kind of holding it down, but you will exhale and this piston will go up and show you how many liters of air. Most people are somewhere between 4 to 6 liters of air that they can exhale into the spirometer, and that will show you your vital capacity. So you guys will have to know, though, that your vital capacity includes how much you can breathe in, inspiratory reserve, your tidal volume, as well as your expiratory reserve. So those three together, inspiratory reserve, tidal volume, plus expiratory reserve, those three are all added up to tell someone their vital capacity. In order to know your total lung volume, though, you would also have to add on this residual volume. So if you add the residual, then you'd get your entire total lung volume. But that's not something that we can measure. So we're just looking at vital capacity, what the amount that's keeping you, that you're able to exchange. When you guys are doing your study sheets, draw yourself this graph. Make sure you know the parts of it. There's a graph like this in your questions in your notes that you can practice with as well. There's a few slides here that we can look at. This is just all the alveoli of a healthy lung. You can see some bigger spaces that are the bronchioles and bronchi that are cross-sectioned here, but you can see there's virtually no tar or residue in these lungs. When you look at the lung carcinoma, there's a mass that's, let's get a different color here. There's a mass that's growing here, and you can see that there's a lot of dark specks indicating that's probably some pollutants of some kind that are collecting in the alveoli. This picture is just showing you the cilia, which is found all the way down your nasal cavity, respiratory tract entirely. So trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles all have these cilia that will catch dust particles. Here's some more healthy lungs in comparison to the smoker's lung that's got all this tar collected in the alveoli. So the tar is causing several problems. It's blocking the alveoli, so that person is short of breath. It's giving them a smoker's cough, so their natural response reflex is to try to cough that out, which is not going to happen because it's stuck in there. And that tar is also something that is carcinogenic, which means it's cancer-causing particles inside as well. So a lot of lung cancers are stemming from the carcinogens that are in the components of smoke from cigarettes or other inhalants. And so you can see definitely how much more trouble this person would have breathing, and it could cause collapse of the alveoli or other resulting lung issues as well, which we'll talk about in the last topic. This slide is talking about the difference between external respiration and internal respiration. And external, of course, is exchanging the gas from the outside and then into your lungs. Those alveoli can get it into the capillaries. Whereas internal respiration is taking the oxygen from the capillaries and having it transferred by diffusion into the cells of the body. So this is happening inside between blood and cells, external happening when oxygen is taken outside and into the blood. You should know the difference between those two. And our last couple slides here will be about how the oxygen is transported through the body. So it says here that there is diffusion happening 70% of the time, and sometimes 30% of the time facilitated or assisted diffusion, but it's both of them are ways that oxygen is going from the alveoli into the bloodstream. And it's saying mainly diffusion because the blood has been carrying carbon dioxide as it comes near the alveoli, so it's already used up all that oxygen, so it's very easy for fresh oxygen to diffuse into that blood. For the carrying, though, once it's in the blood, it's actually the red blood cells that are going to carry the oxygen. The molecule hemoglobin that's in a red blood cell, if you've ever seen a picture of a red blood cell, it's made of hemoglobin proteins that will inherently attach oxygen to them. And so they will be the ones carrying 99% of them. 99% of the oxygen is carried by those hemoglobin molecules, and a little bit of it says is dissolved. I wanted to just point out here something about carbon monoxide, because hemoglobin is attaching to the oxygen, but because carbon monoxide is basically just the carbon attached to the oxygen on the other side, your red blood cells will have a high affinity for carbon monoxide as well. So it's a dangerous thing to be exposed to, because it also has a high affinity to attach to your red blood cells. So where would you be if you were exposed to carbon monoxide? Your red blood cells would happily grab it and take it away, take it to your cells, and your cells would say, I can't use that, it's poison. And that's where the trouble starts, because there will be eventual cell death, like brain cell death, if it's not receiving enough oxygen and getting carbon monoxide instead. Moving on to carbon dioxide. This is our waste product that we need to carry back to the lungs so the lungs can exhale it. Here's a little guy exhaling carbon dioxide. And an interesting thing happens here is that it's only a small amount, 7%, that's actually carried as the molecule CO2. And the reason is that if we were to carry a lot of CO2 in the bloodstream, the cells surrounding the bloodstream that had it would not have a high ability to diffuse it into the blood, because there's already some from other places that it picked it up from. And so what happens is, this is a very brilliant mechanism of getting the body rid of the carbon dioxide, is to not carry it as CO2 at all. And that is what's talked about here, how it's actually converted into bicarbonate ion. So there is this reaction at the bottom that says when carbon dioxide joins water, it can turn to this H2CO3, and that will then dissociate into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. So what's actually happening is a majority, 70% of that carbon dioxide is carried as a bicarbonate ion in your bloodstream. And the reason, again, that is a great thing is because now those cells who have CO2 will not notice that there's any CO2 or hardly any CO2 in the blood, so it will readily have diffusing happening of all that basically waste product. Carbon dioxide will easily go into the bloodstream and be carried to the lungs for exhaling. And so that is how this is made very efficient to get those CO2 molecules out of your cells, carrying it in the blood as bicarbonate ion. Okay, this slide is just explaining how when it does reach the lungs, it does turn from bicarbonate ion back to CO2. So what is actually being exhaled from the lungs is the CO2 molecule. So it does end up leaving the body as carbon dioxide. And our last slide is talking about how the fact that hydrogen ions are part of that reaction means that the body can use this conversion of carbon dioxide and water into hydrogen ion to balance the pH of the body. Because if you have more hydrogen ions, you're going to make the body more acidic. If you have less hydrogen ions, you can help the body pH be more basic. So this is just a way that the pH is maintained in homeostasis, is using that reaction. You don't want the pH too high or too low. Typical pH of the blood is around 7.2, just over basic pH. Okay, thanks guys for listening in on 7.2. There's awesome videos here you can take a look at, as well lung transplant video you can take a look at, and there's a number of resource videos posted on the Google Classroom page that you can check out as well. So enjoy all of these extra videos. They're awesome, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye for now.